When a woman acts like you meant nothing, most men believe the story is over. They assume indifference means closure, distance means peace, and silence means emotional detachment. But in modern dating, what someone shows on the surface is rarely what is happening underneath. And the truth behind why she cannot let you go is far more uncomfortable than most people are ready to hear. A woman does not struggle to let go of a man she truly felt nothing for. Indifference is quiet, clean, and effortless. There is no emotional residue, no contradiction, no tension. When someone genuinely moves on, they do not need to prove it through behavior. They simply disappear emotionally without effort. So when she acts cold, distant, or dismissive, yet still watches, checks, remembers, or subtly stays connected, that is not indifference. That is emotional conflict. And emotional conflict always leaves traces. Modern dating creates this pattern more than ever. People disconnect behaviorally long before they detach emotionally. They leave situations, but not the emotional imprint. They move on publicly, but privately remain tied to how someone made them feel. And that internal contradiction creates behavior that looks confusing from the outside. Here is the truth most men never consider. She is not holding on to you. She is holding on to how she felt when she was with you. That distinction changes everything. When a man leaves an emotional imprint that challenged her sense of control, comfort, or predictability, the bond does not dissolve easily. Even if she decides not to continue the connection, the emotional contrast remains. And contrast is what the mind revisits when everything else feels familiar. This is why some women distance themselves while still keeping you psychologically present. They reduce contact, but not curiosity. They act unaffected, but still react internally. They convince themselves they are done, yet something about you remains unresolved. What makes this so confusing is that her behavior may look dismissive, avoidant, or even cruel. But emotional detachment does not require effort. Acting indifferent does, and effort always signals resistance, not peace. Most men misunderstand this and respond in ways that erase the very thing that made them unforgettable. They chase, they explain, they seek closure, or they disappear emotionally in a way that signals bitterness. All of these responses collapse the emotional tension that kept them present in her mind. The real reason she cannot let you go has nothing to do with words, promises, or unfinished conversations. It has everything to do with emotional impact. You disrupted a pattern. You created a feeling she cannot easily replace. And even if she convinces herself she is done, her nervous system remembers something her logic tries to forget. This video is not about false hope or manipulation. It is about understanding why emotional bonds linger even when behavior changes. Because once you understand what actually keeps you present in someone's mind, you stop reacting emotionally to the surface and start seeing what is really happening underneath. And that awareness alone changes how the story unfolds from here. Before we start, a quick reminder. The real transformation doesn't happen on YouTube. It happens inside the community. If these videos have opened your eyes, what's inside will rebuild your mindset completely. It's not just a course. It's a brotherhood, a private space where men master attraction, emotional control, and the psychology of power. You don't join for a month. You join for life. Every future course, book, and lesson is yours forever. No subscriptions, no limits. Just one decision that changes your direction. If you're serious about growth, discipline, and purpose, click the link below. Join the community. Enroll once, grow forever. Let's dive in. Section number 1. The emotional imprint that makes detachment so difficult. When a woman cannot let you go, it is rarely because of attachment in the traditional sense. It is not about need, dependence, or longing for comfort. It is about an emotional imprint that disrupted her internal equilibrium in a way she did not expect. That disruption lingers long after behavior changes. An emotional imprint forms when someone makes her feel something unfamiliar. Not simply attraction, but emotional contrast. You may have represented calm where chaos existed before, unpredictability where boredom had settled, or emotional depth where surface-level connections dominated. These contrasts register deeply in the nervous system, not just in memory. What most men misunderstand is that emotional imprints are not erased by decisions. A woman can decide to move on while her nervous system still associates you with a particular emotional state. That association does not disappear just because she chooses distance. It fades only when it is replaced by something equally impactful, which rarely happens quickly. This is why she may act indifferent while still reacting internally. Her behavior follows logic, boundaries, or self-protection, while her emotional memory follows sensation. Those two systems do not operate on the same timeline. Behavior can change overnight. Emotional imprints cannot. Modern dating intensifies this because connections often form quickly and deeply without structure. People open emotionally, experience intensity, and then exit abruptly. The emotional bond does not dissolve simply because the connection ended. It remains unresolved. Another critical factor is emotional polarity. When you were present, the dynamic created tension, curiosity, or emotional stimulation that broke her routine. Once you are gone, that polarity disappears. What replaces it often feels flat, predictable, or emotionally dull. That contrast is felt most strongly in absence. This does not mean she wants you back. It means something about you created an internal reference point. And reference points shape future perception. She compares, often unconsciously, how she feels now with how she felt then. Even if she rationalizes the decision, the comparison remains. What makes this so powerful is that emotional imprints are not logical. She may know why she left. She may justify it clearly. But justification does not erase sensation. The body remembers before the mind forgets. Most men weaken this imprint by reacting emotionally after distance appears. They chase reassurance, seek clarity, or express frustration. These behaviors replace mystery with predictability and emotional tension with emotional noise. The imprint fades because the contrast is destroyed. Men who remain grounded, self-directed, and emotionally contained preserve the imprint. Not intentionally, but naturally. Their absence feels different because it is clean. It is not filled with resentment, pleading, or emotional leakage. Understanding this reframes everything. Her inability to let go is not about obsession or confusion. It is about emotional residue that has not yet been replaced. And how you behave now determines whether that residue fades quietly or remains unresolved. Section number 2. Why her indifference is often a defense, not emotional freedom. When a woman acts like you meant nothing, most men assume she has moved on emotionally. They read indifference as peace, coldness as closure, and distance as proof that the bond is gone. In reality, emotional indifference rarely needs to be performed. It happens naturally, quietly, and without effort. What requires effort is emotional suppression. Indifference becomes a defense when detachment feels threatening rather than natural. Acting unaffected allows her to regain control over emotions that feel unresolved. It creates psychological distance without having to process emotional residue directly. In this state, behavior is not an expression of freedom, but an attempt to stabilize internal tension. This is why indifference often appears exaggerated. She may seem colder than necessary, more distant than expected, or dismissive in ways that feel intentional. These behaviors are not about you. They are about regulating her internal state. Emotional neutrality does not require performance. Defense does. Modern dating encourages this pattern. People are taught to move on quickly, stay strong, and avoid emotional vulnerability. Acting indifferent becomes a socially acceptable way to avoid emotional processing. But avoidance does not dissolve attachment. It postpones it. When someone truly lets go, their energy shifts completely. There is no need to monitor, check, or subtly stay connected. The mind does not revisit. The nervous system does not react. Indifference is effortless. Defense is active. This is why she may act detached while still reacting emotionally to reminders of you. A song, a memory, or a sudden absence can trigger internal response despite outward calm. Her behavior is composed. Her internal state is not fully resolved. Most men misread this and try to provoke emotion. They seek reaction, closure, or validation. They believe that if they can make her feel something again, they will regain relevance. In doing so, they destroy the emotional contrast that kept them present in her mind. The men who remain significant do not challenge indifference. They do not test it. They do not confront it. They allow it to exist without reaction. This communicates emotional security. It shows that her behavior does not control their internal state. This response preserves polarity. It keeps the emotional imprint intact. The moment you react to her indifference, you validate it. The moment you remain grounded, you quietly disrupt it. Understanding this changes how you interpret behavior. You stop taking surface-level actions as truth. You stop reacting to appearances. You begin reading emotional effort rather than emotional display. And once you do that, indifference loses its power. It becomes information, not a verdict. Section number 3. Why emotional bonds fade much slower than decisions. One of the most misunderstood aspects of modern relationships is the belief that decisions and emotions move at the same speed. They do not. A woman can decide to step away, cut contact, or act indifferent long before her emotional bond has actually dissolved. This gap between decision and detachment is where confusion lives. Decisions are cognitive. They are shaped by logic, boundaries, fear, or self-protection. Emotional bonds are physiological. They live in memory, sensation, and nervous system responses. You can decide to leave a situation in a moment. You cannot force your nervous system to forget what it felt like just as quickly. This is why people often say they are over it, while still reacting emotionally. The mind wants resolution. The body lags behind. Emotional bonds fade only when the sensations they were built on are replaced, not when they are denied. Modern dating accelerates this gap. Connections form quickly through intensity, vulnerability, and emotional access, then end abruptly through distance or avoidance. The decision to end feels clean. The emotional residue does not. It lingers quietly, resurfacing in unexpected moments. This is also why time alone does not always heal. Time without emotional replacement simply creates space. If nothing fills that space with equal emotional depth, the bond remains unresolved. The memory of how you made her feel becomes a reference point rather than a chapter that closed. What keeps this bond alive is contrast. When her current experiences feel emotionally flat compared to what she once felt with you, the nervous system remembers. Not romantically, but comparatively. This comparison happens beneath conscious thought. Most men misunderstand this and rush to force emotional closure. They ask for clarity. They seek final conversations. They try to be remembered or forgotten deliberately. All of these actions interfere with the natural fading process and often backfire. Emotional bonds dissolve fastest when they are not interfered with. Silence, emotional neutrality, and self-direction allow the nervous system to recalibrate naturally. Any attempt to manage perception keeps the bond activated. This is why the men who stay present in a woman's mind are rarely the ones who tried to. They are the ones who did not react, did not collapse emotionally, and did not attempt to rewrite the ending. Their absence remains clean, and clean absence is harder to process than emotional chaos. Understanding this shifts your focus. You stop trying to control how she feels. You stop chasing reassurance. You allow the emotional bond to resolve itself in its own time. And paradoxically, that restraint is what preserves emotional significance the longest. Section number 4. Why seeking closure often makes it harder for her to let you go. Closure is one of the most misunderstood concepts in modern relationships. People believe closure brings peace, finality, and emotional release. In reality, closure conversations often keep emotional bonds alive far longer than silence ever could. This is because closure is rarely about resolution. It is about emotional reassurance. When a man seeks closure, he is usually trying to relieve discomfort. He wants answers, explanations, or confirmation that what happened made sense. While this feels mature, it keeps emotional energy circulating between two people who are supposed to be separating. That circulation reinforces connection instead of dissolving it. For a woman who is already emotionally conflicted, a closure conversation does not create freedom. It creates stimulation. It reactivates emotional memory. It brings back tone, presence, and the familiar emotional dynamic. Even if the conversation ends politely, the nervous system has been re-engaged. This is why people often feel worse after closure talks. Instead of relief, there is renewed attachment, confusion, or longing. The bond feels stronger, not weaker. Emotional processing cannot happen while the stimulus remains active. Modern dating culture promotes talking it out as the healthiest option, but psychology shows that timing matters. Closure helps only when both people are emotionally detached. When even one person is still emotionally bonded, closure becomes fuel. Most men unintentionally strengthen the bond by revisiting the past. They remind her of shared moments, emotional depth, and connection. They believe they are bringing understanding. In reality, they are reactivating sensation. And sensation is what bonds people emotionally. The men who remain hardest to let go of are not the ones who demanded closure. They are the ones who allowed silence to do the work. Silence does not provoke defensiveness or explanation. It allows the nervous system to recalibrate without interference. This does not mean being cold or dismissive. It means accepting that some bonds end without explanation. Emotional maturity is not always about speaking. Sometimes it is about restraint. When you stop seeking closure, you remove emotional hooks. You allow memory to fade or resolve naturally. You preserve your dignity and stop feeding the emotional loop that keeps you psychologically present. This is why seeking closure often backfires. It feels like an ending, but it is often just another chapter of emotional engagement. The real ending happens when emotional energy is no longer exchanged. Understanding this shifts your behavior. You stop chasing final words. You stop needing validation through explanation. You allow silence to become the closure that words could never provide. Section number 5. What actually makes emotional bonds dissolve and why patience matters more than effort. Emotional bonds do not dissolve because of explanations, logic, or time alone. They dissolve when the nervous system no longer receives emotional stimulation connected to the person. This is the part most people misunderstand, and it is why effort often prolongs attachment instead of ending it. An emotional bond is sustained by activation. Thoughts, conversations, memories, and emotional reactions all keep the bond alive. Even negative emotions, such as frustration, anger, or longing, maintain connection because they keep the nervous system engaged. The body does not differentiate between positive and negative emotional stimulation. It only registers intensity. This is why patience matters more than effort. Effort keeps the emotional channel open. Patience allows it to close naturally. When emotional stimulation stops, the nervous system begins to recalibrate. Familiar emotional patterns lose strength. Sensation fades. This process cannot be rushed or forced. Modern dating works against this process because access is constant. Social media, indirect contact, and digital presence make emotional disengagement harder than ever. Seeing updates, checking activity, or staying loosely connected keeps the bond partially active even when direct contact ends. The men who remain hardest to let go of are those who remove emotional access completely without hostility. They do not provoke reaction. They do not seek reassurance. They do not perform indifference. They simply redirect their energy inward and forward. This patience creates emotional contrast. Over time, the absence of stimulation makes the bond noticeable in hindsight, not as pain, but as a quiet awareness that something once felt different. That awareness only emerges when the emotional noise has fully settled. Most men interrupt this process because silence feels uncomfortable. They mistake discomfort for failure. In reality, discomfort is the sign that the emotional system is adjusting. Breaking silence resets the process and keeps the bond alive artificially. Patience is not passive. It is disciplined. It requires trusting that emotional resolution happens without interference. It requires resisting the urge to manage perception or seek control over how someone feels. When patience is maintained, the bond either dissolves completely or transforms into unresolved emotional residue. In both cases, you regain control over yourself. And that self-control is what preserves dignity, clarity, and long-term attraction. Understanding this removes urgency. You stop trying to be remembered. You stop trying to be forgotten. You allow emotional systems to do what they naturally do when left alone. And paradoxically, that restraint is what keeps your emotional presence strongest in memory. Section number 6. If she reaches out while still acting indifferent, this is where most men break the spell. When a woman reaches out while still acting indifferent, it creates one of the most confusing emotional situations a man can experience. On the surface, her behavior feels contradictory. She appears cold, distant, or detached, yet she initiates contact. This moment feels like an opening, and most men rush to step into it emotionally. That rush is exactly what collapses the dynamic. What most men fail to understand is that a reach out does not mean emotional resolution. It means emotional tension is still active. She is not reaching out because she is certain. She is reaching out because something inside her remains unresolved. Curiosity has replaced closure, but curiosity is fragile. The biggest mistake men make in this moment is emotional over-availability. They respond quickly, warmly, and with visible interest, hoping to re-establish connection. This instantly removes the contrast that made the reach-out happen. The emotional gap closes too fast, and curiosity disappears. Another mistake is emotional probing. Men ask why she reached out, what she feels, or where things stand. These questions feel logical, but they force clarity before emotional readiness exists. Pressure replaces curiosity. The interaction shifts from exploration to defense. Some men go the opposite direction and act cold or distant on purpose. This also backfires. Performative detachment feels inauthentic and creates emotional whiplash. It turns the interaction into a power game rather than a natural unfolding. The correct posture in this moment is calm neutrality. You respond without urgency. You engage without reopening the past. You allow her behavior to lead without asking it to explain itself. This posture communicates emotional stability, not indifference. When you remain grounded, the emotional tension stays intact. She is free to move closer or pull away without pressure. And freedom is the only condition under which genuine desire can re-emerge. If she wants to rebuild connection, consistency will appear naturally, not through words, but through effort and behavior over time. If she does not, the interaction fades without emotional damage. In both cases, you retain self-respect and clarity. Most men ruin this moment because they try to secure certainty. They want to know what it means. But meaning reveals itself through patterns, not conversations. Understanding this allows you to stop reacting emotionally to contact. You stop interpreting reach-outs as signals. You see them as information. And when you treat them that way, you protect your position while allowing the dynamic to resolve itself honestly. Section number 7. Why she can't let you go as long as you don't try to be remembered. The paradox of emotional attachment is this. The more someone tries to stay relevant, the easier they are to forget. And the less someone tries to be remembered, the harder they are to release emotionally. This rule explains why some men fade quickly, while others remain psychologically present long after the connection ends. A woman cannot let you go when your absence feels clean, unresolved, and emotionally undisturbed. Not because you disappeared dramatically, but because you did not rewrite the story through reaction. You did not beg to be understood. You did not force closure. You did not try to manage how she should feel about you. Most men sabotage emotional significance by trying to control memory. They want to be seen a certain way, remembered a certain way, or understood a certain way. In doing so, they flood the emotional space with explanation, reassurance, or emotional noise. Noise closes loops. Silence keeps them open. What keeps you present in her mind is not effort, but restraint. Not intensity, but contrast. Not visibility, but emotional discipline. When your absence does not carry resentment, bitterness, or need, it creates psychological tension. The mind wants to resolve what feels unfinished. This is why emotional bonds linger when they are not interfered with. The nervous system keeps returning to the last stable emotional state. When that state is calm, grounded, and emotionally self-contained, it stands out against future interactions that feel reactive or unstable. Trying to be remembered feels powerful, but it signals insecurity. Allowing yourself to be remembered without effort signals confidence, and confidence is felt even in absence. This does not mean she will come back. That outcome is never guaranteed. What it means is that you do not lose position. You do not collapse into invisibility. You do not shrink yourself to be digestible. You remain intact. And this is the final shift. The men who stay unforgettable are not the ones who cling to the past. They are the ones who move forward without needing validation from it. That forward movement creates the emotional imprint that lingers longest. Once you understand this, you stop trying to be held onto. You allow your absence to speak for you. And when absence speaks calmly, it is heard far louder than words ever could. In short, when a woman cannot let you go, it is not because you held on tighter. It is because you did not. Emotional bonds do not linger through force, explanation, or effort. They linger through contrast, restraint, and the quiet realization that something meaningful was left unresolved. Most men believe being unforgettable requires action. Words, presence, proof. In reality, the men who remain unforgettable are the ones who did not collapse when the connection ended. They did not chase understanding. They did not try to rewrite the past. They did not seek permission to move on. They simply continued forward. This forward movement does something powerful psychologically. It removes emotional pressure while preserving emotional impact. It allows memory to reshape itself without interference. And it forces the mind to confront absence without the comfort of explanation. If she acts like you meant nothing, that does not mean you meant nothing. It often means she is trying to convince herself of something her nervous system has not yet accepted. True indifference does not need performance. True detachment does not need defense. What decides whether you fade quietly or remain present in her mind is not her behavior, but yours. The moment you stop trying to be understood, remembered, or validated, you regain emotional authority. You stop leaking energy into the past and start investing it in yourself. This is not about waiting. It is not about hope. And it is not about control. It is about dignity, emotional discipline. and the confidence to let outcomes unfold without needing to manage them.